Hey everyone. Hey everyone, it's Jodi here. How are you this Monday morning? Happy New Year. I haven't been live this year. And so I'm really, really happy to be here with all of you. We're talking about the nervous system, because I'm about to drop the first season of Anxiety, I'm So Done With You podcast. Yay. Okay, this is very, very exciting. I've been working on it for it's about 2 years. I've been planning to have this podcast come out. There are a lot of things that people have to do to get a podcast out. So it's taken me a while, but it is dropping on Saturday, which is a very auspicious day for a lot of different reasons. And so I'm really excited about it. The season 1 that drops on Saturday goes along with chapter 1 of the book, which is understanding anxiety. So understanding mental health issues, why we have them, why we experience them, how to think about them, because that's the biggest reason why anxiety stays in our life, and sadness and intrusive thoughts and negativity, is because we don't know how to think about it and we make meaning around it, which actually makes us worse a lot of the times. So I was taking the mystery out of anxiety to help people understand it. In the podcast, I go along with the book. Each section of the book has an episode of the podcast, and I try to go a little bit deeper, give some more examples. The first season, I think the second season, I already recorded the second season and third season. I think those are a little bit better. So stick with me. If you are listening to the first season and I'm getting my sea legs, if you will. So it's going to get better, I hope. But also at the end of each season, I'm going to be interviewing some people. This week, I'm dropping an episode where I interview my nephew to get that Generation Z perspective. So it's so good. So good. I'm excited because part of what I was teaching people in the book and in the podcast is how to understand your nervous system, how to understand the way our mind works, how to understand things that come to us from our culture that affect how we see ourselves, how we have relationships, or how we are in relationships, and how we see other people. So it's helpful to understand yourself, because when you don't understand yourself, you make meaning. You have to try to figure it out. And we're often wrong. When people try to figure themselves out, sometimes they're right, but we tend to be negative on ourselves. And then we believe it. We're like, well, that makes sense. Because it makes sense when we're negative on ourselves, because we're so used to it. It's so familiar to us. And so when we are like, why is this happening? And one of our ideas is because of you, because you messed up or whatever. And you're like, well, that makes the most sense out of all of it, because it's a familiar thing that we do, is be really negative about ourselves. So listen to this first season of this podcast. It is for teens and young adults, but anybody will benefit from it, because we are all human. And so we all have these same kind of experiences. And what I teach most of all is that we are humans. We are having human experiences to what's going on in the world. So people don't have problems because they're not coping well, or they're weak, or they can't handle things. That's not why people experience sadness and anxiety. They're experiencing sadness and anxiety because that is a regular human response to what's going on in our world. And understanding that really makes a huge difference, because when we understand how our body's acting, that's our nervous system connected to our emotions, and how our mind's reacting, if we understand those things, first of all, we stop blaming ourselves for everything, but it also gives us the information on what to do to go forward. So that's a basic intro to this podcast that's coming out. And you could get, maybe Rudy's my producer on with me right now. So thanks to Rudy. Rudy, if you go over to my blog, if you could do this, if not, we'll do it in later, but you could put in the comment my trailer to my podcast. So if you go over to jodiammon.com/blog, scroll to the bottom, you'll find the blog post that has that trailer in it. So you could come on over right now and you could subscribe to the podcast. So when it comes out on Saturday, it'll give you a reminder that it's out and you can listen to all of those great episodes. Okay, so today we're going to talk about nervous system privilege. because I read a post by 𝔼𝕞𝕠𝕐𝕁 is a author. She's beautiful. If you don't follow her, 𝐿𝐼SSARANKIN. And she's amazing. She wrote this book called Sacred Medicine, but her writing is really beautiful. And she talks in a way that's really social justice oriented. So I really like her. She is a white woman. And today's Martin Luther King Day. So one of her latest posts from a couple days ago, again, I'm going to share it on my page, and I'll share it under this video. Wherever this video is, if you're watching it on my blog or on YouTube or on Facebook, I'm going to post her post under here because it was really powerful. And it's such an important message for us, especially today, because there's so much equality in the world right now, specifically around race, but around a lot of things. There's inequality. So people have privilege, and then people experience feeling marginalized by our culture because of some social identities that they have. And this has profound effect on ourselves and our relationships and our communities. And so, life isn't fair. That's true. The world isn't fair, but humans really want justice. We kind of grow up thinking like it should be just, but we know it's unfair. But that's not an excuse. We can't say, well, the world's unfair, there's nothing you could do about it. Because no, there is something you could do about it. And we need to constantly be working to readjust that balance of fairness. So people who are in the center need to come outside to let the people who've been marginalized throughout history come into the center and enjoy some of the privileges that we've had for so long. So when we see that things are not fair, we need to do something about it to even the playing field. Maybe it's never going to be perfect because there might be always things out of balance, but that means we have to constantly be trying to do something to rebalance it. Just really making that commitment in our life to do that. But so the reason why that's connected is because Lisa was talking about nervous system privilege. And I think this is a really powerful idea, because I think this nervous system privilege is actually behind all other privilege, and why we have different privilege, or why people are acting like they're acting. So nervous system privilege is about, some people have more trauma in their life than other people have. And the trauma that people experience, and it might be collective trauma, it might be personal trauma, or it might be ancestral trauma, affects their nervous system. So if there's two people in a relationship, they're never exactly 50-50 on how affected their nervous system has been from their ancestors, from their communities, and from their personal experiences. And so there's always an out of balance who has more nervous system privilege. And when you had trauma in your life, it does affect our brain. It does affect our our amygdala and our fight and flight response. It affects how we think about things. It affects how we physically react to things. And so that makes a huge difference in our life. So there's people who've had less trauma, who maybe their life is not as hard, right? Trauma is not a life sentence, and it doesn't make you a bad person in any way, shape, or form. Most people I know that if they experience trauma are the most wonderful people you ever meet. They're my favorite people. And most people experience some kind of trauma. So I love everybody. But in relationship, certain people are triggered on certain things depending on their experience and their history and their lineage. So what am I saying? So when you have that, it affects shame, it affects fear that you have. And when you have an increase of shame and fear, you actually feel powerless, and then sometimes try to get power over other people or try to get power over yourself. This is what we do to adjust. When we feel powerless in our life, which all the time because there's tons of messages coming at us that we're powerless and worthless and out of control. And when we get those messages, and especially if you've had a lot of trauma, if you hear those messages, they're going to trigger those feelings of powerlessness, worthlessness, and feelings of out of control. And then you either try to get control over yourself, and that might look like perfectionism. Who could relate? Or you try to get control over other people or a situation, right? Super clean. Everything's got to be super clean or something like that, right? Or some kind of other patterns of or compulsions that people might do to help themselves feel more in control. And then there's the people who get control over other people. Those are, there's a lot of that in the news, right? A lot of narcissism and us learning about narcissism and how that affects us, thus causing more people to experience trauma. So if we understood our nervous system and understood what we need to take care of our nervous system, to recover and heal our nervous system after bad experiences, then we can decrease our shame, decrease our fears, which will increase our robustness, which will increase our kindness to others. Right? So if we experience more robustness, people who have privilege for their social identifiers, unearned privilege, have more bandwidth. And people who have historically or personally and continuing to be marginalized because of their social identifiers, that is a trauma that they experience that decreases their bandwidth, which perpetuates the situation, perpetuates a inequality or trauma response situation, right? So if we heal, we will treat other people better. So people who have privilege, as they feel robust, they are trying to change the tide in the world. They are trying to do that. Now, there's people who experience privilege, not nervous system privilege, but like white privilege or able-bodied privilege or heterosexual privilege, who don't have good nervous system privilege, and they are siding on that power and privilege, right? They are perpetuating the problem because of their nervous system. That's why it's all connected. So they may experience social privilege because of their identifiers, but if they have nervous system, if they have a history of trauma, they're perpetuating the power over, if that makes sense. And I have two cameras here and I keep looking at the wrong one. So if my eyes aren't looking at you and it's like weird, it's because I accidentally, this one's not even plugged in, but I keep looking at it. So I hopefully that makes sense, and it feels like it's something that could really help us. So that has been my path for the last couple of years. That's why I started writing on anxiety. Really, it was about social justice. It was about trying to heal people's nervous system so they stop trying to fall on their social privileges to get power over other people so they feel comfortable, right? If I decrease people's fear and decrease people's anxiety and heal those nervous systems, then they're going to be kinder and more wonderful and more open. Relationships are going to get better. Communities are going to get better. We're going to help everybody, right? We're going to make sure everyone has a home and everyone is cared about and everyone has enough money and all that kind of stuff. So that is my mission. And actually now this is my last semester of my doctorate, and I'm getting my doctorate in social work with a huge focus on social justice and ethics and diversity and creating a more equal world. So, or equitable. The difference between equal and equitable is very powerful, because equal means everyone's equal, but we didn't all start at the same place. So if everybody was equal, it still would be unequal. That's equity. Equity is adjusting the inequality so that on all levels things are equal. Like it makes up for what hasn't come in the past. It's a much more powerful way to see it. So yeah. Thank you for listening and ongoing. I know I've been talking a lot, but just trying to explain it. So, so glad to be in your ear, to be talking to you today. I think you're going to really love this podcast, because I hope, and it's my dream and my hope, to make it a better world. And so this week, I'm going to hopefully be dropping some, talking about fear of failure, talking about fear of abandonment, talking about fear of rejection over on my TikTok channel. That's at Dr. Jodi on TikTok. I'm going to be putting out some videos to try to promote this podcast that's coming out this weekend, because if we understand ourselves, we could feel better, we could heal ourselves, and then we could heal this world. And that is really, really important to me. And hopefully it is to you. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this. If you want more from me, come on over to my website, jodiamen.com, where I have more videos and articles and resources on how to love yourself, release fear, and dive into a life purpose with integrity and hopefulness and joy as well. So I'll see you next Monday on my live, usually around 11 a.m. Eastern. And until then, be present and let that you want to be shine through.